Hi, this is Sophie Grace.
Hi, I'm Mamona Tamada.
Hi, my name is Shay Rudolph.
Hi, I'm Malia Baker.
Hello, my name is Sochi Gomez. I play Christy Thomas on the Netflix series The Babysitter's Club. Today, I will be reading you a chapter from Christy's Great Idea by Anne M. Martin. Marianne is my best friend. We live right next door to each other, and we even look a little alike. We're both small for our age, and we both have brown hair that falls right past our shoulders. But that's where the similarity ends, because I can't keep my mouth shut, and Marianne is very shy and very quiet. Luckily, that's only on the outside. People who know her well, like Claudia and Stacy and me, get to see the inside of her. And the Marianne that's hiding in there is a lot of fun. Hey, I greeted her. I pulled her hand out of her mouth and looked at her nails. Marianne, how do you expect to ever wear nail polish if you keep doing this? Oh, come on, Christy, she said. I'll be 75 before my father ever lets me wear that. Marianne's father is the only family she's got. Her mother is dead, and she has no brothers or sisters. Unfortunately, her father is pretty strict. My mother says it's just because Mr. Spear's nervous, since Marianne's all he's got. You'd think, though, that he would let her wear her hair down instead of always in braids, or give her permission to ride her bike to the mall with Claudia and me once in a while. But no. At Mr. Spear's house, it's rules, rules, rules. It's a miracle that Marianne's even allowed to be a member of the Babysitter's Club. We walked out of school, and suddenly, I began running. I'd forgotten all about decorum because I'd remembered something else. Oh my gosh, I cried. Marianne raced after me. What is it? She panted. It's Tuesday, I called over my shoulder. So, slow down, Christy. It is too hot to run. I can't slow down. Tuesday is my afternoon to watch David Michael. I'm supposed to beat him home. Otherwise, he's going to have to watch himself. David Michael is my 6-year-old brother. My big brothers, Charlie, Sam, and I, all are responsible for him one afternoon a week until my mom gets home from work. Kathy, this 15-year-old girl that lives a few blocks from us, watches him the other 2 afternoons. Kathy gets paid to watch him. Charlie and Sam and I don't. Marianne and I ran all the way home. We reached my front yard, sweaty and out of breath. And there was David Michael, sitting forlornly on the front steps, his dark curls limply across his forehead. He burst into tears as soon as he saw us. What's wrong? I asked. I sat down beside him and put my arm around his shoulders. I'm locked out, he wailed. What happened to your key? David Michael shook his head. I don't know. He wiped his eyes, hiccuping. Well, I said, it's all right. I got my own key out of my purse. David Michael burst into fresh tears. No, it's not all right. I couldn't get in, and I have to use the bathroom. I unlocked the door. When David Michael gets like this, it's best to just kind of ignore his tears and pretend like everything's fine. Marianne and I held the door open for him and ushered him to the bathroom. Our collie, Louie, tore outside as we went in. He was frantic to get outdoors after being locked inside since breakfast time. While you go to the bathroom, I told David Michael, I'm going to fix us some lemonade, okay? David Michael actually smiled. Okay. I'm good with children. So is Marianne. My mom says so. Both of us get lots of afternoon and weekend babysitting jobs. In fact, I'd been offered a job that afternoon, but I had to turn it down, of course, because of David Michael. That reminded me. Hey, I said to Marianne as I turned on the air conditioning. Mrs. Newton asked me to babysit Jamie this afternoon. Didn't she call you after she called me? Marianne sat down at the kitchen table and watched me mix lemonade powder into a big glass pitcher. She shook her head. No, maybe she called Claudia. Claudia Kishi lives across the street from me. She and Marianne and I have lived on Bradford Court since we were born. We've grown up together, but somehow Claudia has never spent as much time with Marianne and I as we've spent together. For one thing, Claudia's really into art and is always off to art classes or else, holed up in her room, painting or drawing. Or reading mysteries. That's her other passion. She's much more grown up than Marianne and I. When we were little, Marianne and I were always playing school or dolls or dress up, and we basically had to brainwash Claudia into playing with us. A lot of the time, we just didn't bother. But Claude's always good for a bike ride or going to the movies or the community pool. As far as I'm concerned, the best thing about Claudia is that her dad isn't Mr. Spear. Mr. Kishi can be strict about Claudia's schoolwork, but he doesn't faint at the suggestion of going downtown for a Coke or something. Over the summer, it had started to feel like Claudia was drifting apart from Marianne and me. Even though we were all going into 7th grade, Claudia suddenly seemed older. She started caring about boys and had spent more time than usual adding to her wardrobe and talking on the phone. We'd all made up at the end of the summer, but it still felt like we were going in different directions sometimes.
Hi, I'm Momona Tamada. I play Claudia Kishi on the Netflix series The Babysitter's Club, and today I'm excited to read you a passage from Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls by Anna Martin. Late that afternoon, Christy and I began one of our most terrifying babysitting experiences ever. Jamie Newton's mother had called 2 weeks earlier, needing a sitter for that evening. There was one hitch. Jamie would not be the only child at the Newtons. His wild cousins would be there too. I'd babysat for them once before, by myself, and based on that experience, I told Mrs. Newton she would need 2 sitters the second time, especially since the job was over dinner hour and the kids would need to be fed. Jamie's cousins were Rob, Brenda, and Rosie. Rob, the oldest, was 8, Brenda was 5, and Rosie was 3. They were all tough to handle. Rob hated girls, including girl babysitters. Brenda was fussy, and Rosie was noisy. Well, they were all noisy. The other time I'd sat for them, they jumped and ran around the living room and disobeyed practically everything I said. I'd finally managed to calm them down, but I still wasn't looking forward to the evening. Although it was bound to be different with Christy there. We arrived at the Newtons at 5 o'clock and found the place already in chaos. The adults, Jamie's parents, and Mr. and Mrs. Feldman, the parents of Rob, Brenda, and Rosie, were all trying to get ready to leave. But 3 of the 4 kids, all but Rob, were crying. Mrs. Feldman couldn't find the sandwiches she brought for our supper, and Mrs. Newton suddenly discovered that her good coat wouldn't button around her middle anymore. "Darn," she said, "I wore this coat the entire time I was pregnant with Jamie. I just don't understand it." "Sis," called Miss Feldman from the kitchen, "the sandwiches are absolutely not in the refrigerator. If they are, they're invisible." "Rosie, stop it. I don't know why Brenda hit you." "Not that refrigerator. I put them in the one in the basement," Mrs. Newton called back. "Get Jamie to show you." "What am I going to wear tonight? I can't wear this awful maternity coat, not to this cocktail party." "Roger," she shouted upstairs to Mr. Newton. "Mommy," Jamie came sniffling into the hall and pulled on his mother's hand. "I don't want to go into the basement with Aunt Diane." "Never mind, sis, I found them." "Brenda, stop it. You're pestering your sister." Well, things went on that way for about 5 more minutes, but finally Mrs. Newton found a shawl to wear instead of the coat. And miraculously, Jamie, Brenda, and Rosie stopped crying. The adults left. Christy and I looked at each other, and then the living room where the 4 kids were standing. They eyed us, and we eyed them. Rob gathered his sisters in a huddle while Jamie looked on. Suddenly, the huddle broke, and the Feldmans began tearing and screaming and jumping around, just as they had done when I sat for them before. That time I had ignored them, and after a while they had quieted down. But Christy had a different idea. You have to remember that even though she's small for her age, she's a tomboy, and she's used to boys and a big family. The Feldmans hadn't been screeching and tearing through the living room for more than 3 seconds when Christy put her fingers in her mouth and blew hard. An ear-piercing whistle screamed from her lips. The Feldmans stopped cold. "Now hear this," shouted Christy. "No yelling, no running, and no jumping inside this house." And I meant it. She saw that Rob was about to say something, so she added, "One false move and I'll punch your lights out. That goes for all of you. Do you hear me?" The Feldmans nodded. Jamie was wide-eyed with disbelief at what his beloved Christy had just said. "Do you understand me?" she went on. The Feldmans nodded. "Any questions?" Rob started to open his mouth again and had thought better of it and raised his hand instead. "Yes," said Christy. "How did you do that?" "Do what?" "Whistle with your fingers." "Oh, here, I'll show you. But if you learn how to do it, remember that this is usually an outdoor whistle and not an indoor one. Got it?" "Yes." Christy took Rob into the basement for whistle practice, and I led the 3 younger children into the rec room and had just settled them into one of Jamie's favorite activities, coloring pictures of monsters, when the phone rang. "I'll get it," I called out to Christy. I dashed into the kitchen. "Hello, Newton's residence." Nothing. I couldn't hear a sound. "Hello?" I tried again. It's funny how sometimes you can be just as scared by nothing as by something. My hands were shaking when I hung up the receiver. "Who was it?" called Christy. "Wrong number," I replied uneasily. I didn't want to frighten any of the kids, but considering what had happened to the Goldmans the night before, I suddenly thought I had a good reason to be nervous. As soon as possible, I would tell Christy about the call in private. A half an hour later, as I was just beginning to think about supper, the phone rang again. Christy was coming up the stairs with Rob, who looked very proud of himself. "I'll get the phone this time," she said. I nodded and followed her into the kitchen. "Hello," she said. "Hello?" I could tell immediately that it was another one of those calls.
Hi, my name is Shave Rudolph, and I play Stacey McGill on the Netflix show The Babysitters Club. I am super excited today to read a little bit of The Truth About Stacey by Anne M. Martin. Before I got diabetes, I really had it pretty easy. I'm an only child. For as long as I could remember, I'd lived in a large apartment in a nice, safe building with a doorman on the Upper West Side in New York City. I had my own bedroom with windows that looked out over Central Park. I went to a private school, I didn't have any pets, and of course, no brothers or sisters. But I wasn't lonely. I had lots of friends at school and in my building, and my parents let me invite them over whenever I wanted. Mom and Dad seemed to be pretty cool parents. A little pushy maybe, and more involved in my life than I liked, but that was it. They let me dress the way I wanted, go out with my friends after school, and play my stereo at top volume as long as the neighbors didn't complain. Then, right before I began to get sick, Mom found out that she and Dad couldn't have any more children. They'd been trying for a long time, but they hadn't been able to have a brother or sister for me. It was unfortunate that they got that news just before I got diabetes. What if I died? I'd be gone, and they wouldn't be able to have another child. Suddenly, they were faced with the possibility of no children. No children of their own, anyway. That was sad, but the upshot of it was that practically overnight, Mom and Dad became the world's two most overprotective parents. And not just where food and insulin were concerned. Suddenly, they began to worry about me when I wasn't home. Mom would call me at my friends' apartments after school to make sure I was all right. She even called me at school every noon until the headmistress suggested that it wasn't very healthy for me, and reminded Mom about the nice, qualified school nurse. Then began the business with the doctors. My parents became convinced that they could find either a miracle cure or a better treatment for me. They never doubted that I had diabetes, they just couldn't leave it alone. They made helping Stacey their new goal in life. Unfortunately, they weren't helping me at all. I was losing friends fast, and being yanked out of school to see some new doctor every time I turned around didn't make things any better. Lane Cummings began to hate me the night I wet the bed we were sharing. I didn't blame her for being mad, but why did she have to be mad for so long? We'd been best friends since we were 5. Lane said that the real reason she was mad was that I had spent a lot of time at the slumber party that night talking to Allison Ritz, a new girl. But I don't know. Lane acted strange after I wet the bed. Stranger still the first time I had to stay in the hospital, and even stranger after I started going to all those doctors. Maybe I should have told her about the diabetes, but for some reason, my parents kept the truth a secret from their friends, so I did the same. In fact, I didn't tell anyone the truth until we left New York and started over again in Connecticut. I finally told Claudia, Christy, and Marianne my secret, but Lane still doesn't know. And even though her parents are my parents' best friends, they don't know either. I don't see what the big deal is, but I guess it doesn't matter now. At the beginning of my illness, hospital visits couldn't be avoided. I needed tests, I had to have my diet and insulin regulated, and once I fainted at school and went into insulin shock, and the ambulance came and took me to St. Luke's. If one of my friends got that sick, I would have called her in the hospital and sent her cards and visited her when she went home. But not Lane. She seemed almost afraid of me, although she tried to cover up by acting cool and snooty. And my other friends did what Lane did because she was the leader. Their leader, my leader, and we were her followers. The school year grew worse and worse. I fainted twice more at school, each time causing a big scene and getting lots of attention. And every week, it seemed, I missed at least one morning while Mom and Dad took me to some doctor or clinic or other. Lane called me a baby, a liar, a hypochondriac, and a bunch of other things that indicated she thought my parents and I were making a big deal over nothing. But if she really thought it was nothing, why wouldn't she come over to my apartment anymore? Why wouldn't she share sandwiches or go to the movies with me? And why did she move her desk away from mine in school? I was confused and unhappy and sick, and I didn't have any friends left thanks to Lane. I hated Lane. In May, Mom and Dad announced that we were moving to Connecticut. I didn't have any friends there, but I didn't have any left in New York either, so what did it matter? They said they were moving because Dad wanted to transfer to a different branch of the company he worked for. But somehow I knew they were moving partly because of me. To get me out of the city, away from the sooty air and the dirt and the noise, away from all the bad times and bad memories. They were overreacting, and I knew it, but I didn't care.
Hi, I'm Malia Baker, and I play Marianne Spear on the Netflix show The Babysitter's Club. I'm very excited to be reading to you a passage from Marianne Saves the Day by Anne M. Martin. I couldn't stand it any longer. I decided to ask my father if he would extend my babysitting hours. If all the other members of the club were allowed to stay out until 10 o'clock, I'd be able to as well. After all, I was the same age as they were, I was just as responsible as they were, and I had just as much homework as they did. The one job that I had to turn down when I was taking phone calls the Friday of our fight had been for a client who needed a sitter until 10 o'clock on Saturday night. Christy had taken the job. I felt humiliated, but I was nervous about facing my father. He wouldn't be angry, he just wouldn't see my side, unless I figured out exactly the right way to approach him, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to do that. But by Monday night, I was ready to talk to him, no matter what. Unfortunately, he came home in a bad mood. We lost a Cutter case today, he told me. I can't believe it. I thought it was open and shut. The jury was highly unreasonable. I nodded. Dad, honestly, sometimes people can be so unfair. No, not unfair. Unthinking. That's it. Unthinking. We were setting the table, getting ready for dinner. Dad, I said again, can you imagine letting someone go who so clearly was guilty of grand larceny? I shook my head. I guess not. Dad? What is it, Marianne? Right then, I should have decided not to pursue the business of later hours, but I had been planning on it all day. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say. I didn't know if it would work, but I was going to say, very rationally, Dad, I've been thinking. I'm 12 years old now, and I feel that I could stay out until 10 o'clock every now and then when I'm babysitting. Not on school nights, of course, because I recognize that I need my sleep, but just on some Friday and Saturday nights. Dad, I've been thinking, I said. The phone rang. Dad leaped forward. Hello? Yes, I know. I know. Right, an appeal. That's what I was thinking. What? Oh, yes, definitely. The conversation went on for 10 minutes while our frozen pizza finished baking and then began drying out in the oven. Dad finally got off the phone, and immediately it rang again. When he got off the second time, I practically threw the pizza down in front of him. Dad, I want to stay out until 10 o'clock when I babysit at night, I blurted out. My father looked at me blankly. What? Oh, Marianne, no. I'm afraid that's out of the question. But Dad, everyone else gets to. I'm sure not everyone does. You can't possibly be the only 6th grader who has to be in by 9 or 9:30. Dad, I'm in 7th grade, and I am the only member of the Babysitter's Club who can't stay out until 10. You treat me like a baby. But look at me. I'm halfway through 7th grade. In a year and a half, I'll be starting high school. For a moment, my father looked taken aback. Then a change came over his face. He rubbed his hands over his eyes tiredly. At last he said softly, It's not easy for a father to raise a daughter alone. I've had to be both a father and a mother. On top of that, I'm not home much. I'm doing the best I can. But Christy and Claudia and Stacy, what Christy and Claudia and Stacy and their parents do is not our concern. That's not fair. Don't you think Mrs. Thomas is a good mother? Don't you think Mimi and the Kishis care about Claudia? Those are not my issues, my father said. The issues are you and me and your bedtime. Dad, I'm old enough to stay out until 10 o'clock. I'm 12, and I'm very responsible and mature. Don't my teachers always write that on my report card? Marianne is a joy to have in class. She's responsible and mature. You don't sound mature at the moment. I knew I didn't. I was whining. But it was too late to stop. I was on a roll. I'm also too old to wear my hair in these dumb braids, and my room looks like a nursery. It's a room for a 5-year-old. My father looked at me sharply. Young lady, I do not like the tone of your voice. You know, you're not the only parent who isn't around much, I went on, ignoring him. Mrs. Thompson is hardly ever home either, and she has to raise Christy and Christy's brothers alone. And Sam and Charlie don't have Peter Rabbit all over their bedroom. I'd like to see a few changes around here. I like to be allowed to choose my own clothes. I like to take my hair to these braids. I like to wear nail polish and stockings and lipstick. And if a boy were to ever ask me out to the movies or something, I'd like to be able to say yes without even checking with you first. You know what? Sometimes you don't seem like my father to me. You seem like my jailer. It was that exact moment that I knew I'd gone too far. Sure enough, my father turned his back on me, then in the calmest voice imaginable, he said, "Marianne, the subject is closed. Please go to your room." I went. I felt horrible. I knew I'd insulted him, and I hadn't wanted to do that. But what did he think was going to happen if I wore my hair loose or took down Humpty Dumpty? Did he think I'd run away or start hanging out with the wild kids at the mall? And what could happen between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock while I was babysitting that couldn't happen before 9?
Hello, my name is Sochi Gomez, and I play Dawn Schaefer on The Babysitters Club on Netflix. And I am going to read Dawn and the Impossible 3, number 5, chapter 7. I had to do something about Christy. I was trying my hardest to be nice to her, but things were no better between us. So one day at school, out of the clear blue, I said to her, "Want to come over to my house this afternoon?" I didn't even know I was going to say it. It just slipped out. I was as surprised as Christy was. And we were both pretty surprised when she replied, "Okay, sure." What I had gotten myself into. What would Christy and I do? Every time we talked, it turned into an argument. Well, I thought, we could always watch a movie on the VCR. I hadn't seen The Sound of Music in a while. After school that day, I met Christy and we walked to my house together. Marianne didn't walk with us. She was babysitting for Charlotte Johansson, and the Johanssons live in the opposite direction from me. That was just as well, since Marianne is sort of the cause of our problems. Christy and I needed some time alone together. At first, we talked along in silence. Christy stared at the ground. She didn't look mad, but I felt uncomfortable being silent with her. "Oh, we live in an old farmhouse," I told her, just to make conversation. "It was built in 1795. "Oh, yeah?" said Christy. Was she interested? Or did she think I was bragging? "Yeah," I replied uncertainly. "Do you like it?" "Mostly. It's neat living in a place that's old, but the rooms are kind of small and the doorways are low." The first time Marianne came over, she said the colonists must have been midgets. Christy burst out laughing. Then she caught herself and scowled. She pressed her lips into 2 straight lines. Thin lips are never a good sign. I cringed. How could I have mentioned Marianne? I really hadn't meant to. I went on about the house some more. When the house was first built, I said, there was nothing but farmland for miles around it. But Stony Brook kept growing, and the people who owned the house kept selling off land until finally there was just 1.5 acres left, with a house, an outhouse, a barn, and an old smokehouse. It sort of got run down. By the time my mom bought the place, nobody had lived on the property for 2 years. We got it cheap. "You have a barn on your property?" Christy asked with interest. "Mm-hmm." "Do you play in it?" "Well," I said, "I'm not supposed to go in it too much, but sometimes I play there." "Why are you supposed to go in it?" Because it's old. Mom's afraid the roof will come crashing down sometime." She may be right. "You don't have any animals, do you?" asked Christy. "You mean in the barn?" I shook my head. "But the people who lived there before us must have. There's still bales of hay sitting around, and there's tons of hay in the hayloft. There are great places to hide, and we rigged up a rope that we can swing down from the beam that's way high up under the roof and land in the hay." "Really?" said Christy. "Yup." She paused. Then she said, "I guess you and Marianne play in the barn all the time." "Marianne?" I exclaimed. "Not a chance. She won't jump off the beam into the hayloft. She won't even go inside because of what my mom said about the roof. She may have changed this spring, but not that much. Christy looked at me and grinned. When we got home, the front door was locked, so I let myself in with a key. Back in California, I never needed a key. Mom was always home. Now I'm in danger of becoming a latchkey kid. I almost said so, but luckily I remembered just in time that Christy had been a latchkey kid for years. Instead, I said, I wonder where my mom went. We found out as soon as we walked into the kitchen. Stuck to the refrigerator was a magnet shaped like a pair of lips with a note that said, Hi kids, I've gone on 2 job interviews. Back at 5, love Mom. P.S. Do not, under any circumstances, touch the tofu ginger salad in the refrigerator. Christy looked at me wide-eyed. You mean there's a chance someone would? I glared at her, but it turned into a smile. I totally encourage you to go get this book and completely finish the entire book because it's so good. And tune into our show, Babysitters Club, on Netflix.